There's an old viral saying that says the best camera is the one that's in your pocket. Well, for filmmakers, that hasn't always been the case. But with the iPhone 15 Pro and beyond series of phones that can shoot in ProRes, now there's a bit of truth to that statement. Let's dive in and have a bit of a look. So this is a video containing a bunch of footage I shot on a recent trip through Asia on the iPhone 15 Pro. This entire video is shot on that phone, including this interview. I'm using the little Rode Wireless Pros for audio. There's a bunch of equivalents by DJI, Holyland, etc. I think pretty much all of those will do a good job. With this phone, this was a jump for me from the 11 to the 15 Pro. And I've been really impressed with a bunch of the results. And I'm gonna run through some of those results, how to get good results, and just in my opinion, best practice for shooting with a camera like the iPhone 15 Pro. And I think this video will be relevant to upcoming iPhone releases as well. I don't think too much is going to change other than them continuing to get better and better. But yeah, I'm going to share some of my findings and tips and things like that. So my way of filming with the iPhone 15 Pro, I'm doing everything using the Blackmagic Camera App, which is free to download. Pretty cool because, you know, in the past you had to pay for apps like that. I think there was one called the Filmmaking Pro. So for Blackmagic to drop this app, it's pretty cool. Now, I think for anyone who's ever used a camera before, you'll open this app and you'll kind of immediately see how the iPhone works completely different to any other camera. So it's a fixed aperture, so you don't have control over that. You're not able to change the f-stop. Basically, when you see this camera on auto, you'll just see that it's just constantly changing ISO, shutter, and white balance. And, you know, I guess it kind of shows that there's a lot of secret sauce in the Apple way of creating images. And it's pretty impressive, to be honest. And what I've learned from shooting with this phone is that you have to approach it a little bit different to a camera. So I'm going to run through why I'm using the Blackmagic app just as opposed to the regular camera app, and also some of the settings I use in the Blackmagic app when I'm filming. For starters, I think one of the biggest reasons to use the Blackmagic app over the internal camera feature is when you record in ProRes using the default camera, it only lets you record in HQ, which are massive files. And especially considering you're somewhat limited with the internal storage unless you plug in an SSD or something like that. The Blackmagic app lets you record in ProRes-LT, a significantly more efficient recording mode that also gives you really good results. It's still giving you nice 10-bit images in Apple log, so plenty of information there to grade, and you just do a very basic test in the ProRes between the baked-in kind of looks out of the iPhone, and you'll notice they look really different, and you'll probably be pretty impressed, to be honest. And one of the reasons why I was pretty excited about this phone, and especially once I tested it out a little bit, is I film documentaries, and I know there's sometimes scenarios where things suddenly happen and you don't have a camera on you ready to go. Or if you use a Red, you don't have the 1 minute plus startup time to wait for it to turn on. But already, since having this, there's been scenarios where I've just quickly pulled out the phone and got a shot, and those shots are going to land in future documentary projects. There's sometimes scenarios where something just happens so quick that having your phone in your pocket and being able to just pull it out and quickly capture it and get a usable shot, so a shot that's in 4K 10-bit log, the base ingredients to be able to then color grade to get a shot that will hopefully match up with your other footage. Being able to have that in your pocket is incredibly powerful, and I've already been able to use it and get some shots when I didn't have my camera on me, when it would have been hard to grab my camera out, when I wouldn't have been able to hold a camera, you know, things like that. I'm loving it for that. And on this recent trip, myself and my partner just did through Asia, I took my Sony a7S III, but I also shot a bunch of stuff just with the iPhone, and I'm pretty impressed with the results. Like, I'd be able to make some edits using a mix of the a7S III footage and the phone. So, you know, a7S III, I had a lightweight 50mm lens with a ProRes filter on the front. So with that camera, I was able to get nice shallow depth of field shots, you know, full frame sensor, f1.8 lens, shots that look quite different to what you would be able to get on an iPhone. And then with the iPhone, whenever I needed a different focal length or just to quickly get a shot, I could pull it out and just get the shot. Now with the phone, and my model in particular, the 15 Pro, there's 3 main lens options. So 13mm, a wide angle, 24mm, which is the default and the best quality from what I've seen. And then there is also a telephoto mode. You can go up to 77mm. I've used all of those and got good results. Like I said, the 24 probably looks the best. That's what this interview has been shot on now, and that's what the bulk of my test footage looks like. But, you know, when you're traveling around, to just pull your phone out of your pocket, quick wide, quick tight, quick mid, few quick shots, it's super handy and definitely gets shots that are very usable, and especially with a bit of a grade, can end up looking pretty nice. Now I'll talk a little bit about how I use the Blackmagic app and some of the good features in it. So like I mentioned earlier, I like using ProRes-enabled. I find given the storage on the phone, it's just a good file size. It's going to give you good files for editing and color grading, but it's also, they're going to be small enough that you're going to be able to shoot a decent amount. So straight off the bat, one feature that I find pretty handy is the stabilization. I basically just leave mine on the standard setting and find that really good for most scenarios. You can put it up as well as even like extreme ones where if you're shooting out of a car or something like that, it will do not a bad job at stabilizing it, but keep in mind every time you bump up the intensity on those stabilization settings, you are cropping in a little bit as well. So I leave it on standard and find that pretty good. Another useful setting is easily being able to switch between frame rates. So I often shoot stuff where I'm moving around pretty quickly in 50 frames and then conform it back to 25 afterwards, so I can get that 50% slow-mo and that's super handy when you're quickly run and gun and trying to get shots, and also much easier to control and set than it would be in the camera menu. Some other settings is you've got full control over white balance, shutter, and ISO. Now, when I first started using this app, I probably thought I'd be using it in a pretty manual way a lot more than I do, but I've actually found just running somewhat auto settings actually kind of gives the best results. And I think that comes back to kind of what I was mentioning earlier, that you look at the way the tech works in this phone/camera, and it's just so different to how your normal camera works. So especially like white balance and things like that, I find it's best just to let it do its thing. So I'm more or less setting things up, you know, making sure it's recording in log, having the stabilization turned on, and probably having it in 50 frames. Then I'm just pulling it out of my pocket, opening the app, and tapping the screen to get exposure and focus. So tapping your subject, tapping the scene, tapping whatever you want the exposure and focus to be centered around, and just leaving it at that. There's some scenarios where you might like to lock things, like for example this interview now, I've locked the shutter and the white balance, and then just got the exposure manually myself using the ISO. And you know, that's good at the moment because nothing's going to be changing. It's good just to lock it off. But yeah, and I think it also comes back to the kind of philosophy of shooting with a phone instead of a camera. You want to make this easy on yourself. The reason you're shooting with this is because you're in scenarios where having a camera might not be practical, or you want to be able to shoot in a quick and efficient way. So I think making it set up for yourself so you can just pull it out, point it at your subject, tap the screen, hit record, and it's rolling and getting you the shot. I think that's the way you want to approach shooting with a phone instead of a camera. And yeah, when I first bought this phone, I bought an ND filter for it as well, and I was kind of thinking I'd lock all the settings and then just get exposure using a variable ND. But look, I did some tests, and I honestly think the auto stuff off this is as good or better than you will get for trying to manually dial in the settings, you know, with exceptions. You might want to expose for a sky to make a sunset moodier, or to get deeper colors out of a scene, you know, things like that. But yeah, generally speaking, I think in particular inside this Blackmagic app, the tech's really good, and that you can get pretty good shots just letting it more or less pick the settings for you. And you know, this is coming from a full-time filmmaker. I operate cameras for a living. It's not coming from a place of being lazy necessarily. It's more so just coming from my thoughts from testing this out, that it does feel like it works very different to other cameras. And you know, as long as you set a few parameters and don't let it pick any crazy ISOs or white balance or any settings like that, you should be pretty fine with it. Some other things I picked up on, the low light's not great. You will definitely see that, especially when you're shooting in log, as soon as it starts cranking the ISO up, you do see noise pretty quickly. And I think in the regular camera app, it's just obviously doing a lot of internal noise reduction and things like that. And you know, that's something you'll kind of notice when you compare the footage you get shot in log, say through the Blackmagic app, versus how things look just through the regular camera app. You realize that there's a lot going on in the processing of every scene that is shot using the Apple camera. It's got some crazy algorithms going on, which I think for the main part of why it's capable of such good images. But then I think when you're in the log kind of settings, you will start to see things fall apart a bit as well, when it's not adding so much of its own kind of tone mapping and noise reduction and things like that. So yeah, it definitely loves light, bright colors, bright shooting conditions, things like that is where it really stands out. And yeah, as you'll see throughout this video, got a bunch of shots that I think look pretty good. And I definitely think this comes down to like a functionality factor as to why you'd shoot with the iPhone. I don't think it's better than other cameras, but I think for how compact it is and how usable it is to just keep in your pocket and pull out at any time, it's definitely an option to consider for certain scenarios. You know, on this recent trip, we might be buying some street food and want to get a bit of a shot of them cooking the food, or out on a day trip on boats and things like that, on a tiny boat, pull the phone out, get a few quick pictures, things that would just be super hard with a normal camera, suddenly quite easy with this camera that is just always in your pocket. So yeah, I'm pretty excited that technology has got to this point, and that now this phone in my pocket is almost always there as a backup capable of high quality footage, whether it's the only camera I've got on me or whether it's a bit of a backup camera if I ever needed it. Just the camera that's there that I can always pull out and get a shot that's going to be pretty usable and be able to cut in with other footage. Yeah, really enjoy using it, and yeah, I think it just adds to creative filming options, having this good camera always on you, especially if you have a bit of your own knowledge on composition and color grading and anything like that. Or you might just be a really good editor who's good at picking the music well, splicing everything together. You make pretty good films with these cameras now. Hit me up in the comments if you have any specifics. Cheers.